That's awesome. Let's gather up here. So we're going to move on into some kind of specific applications of some of the stuff that we talked about yesterday. But the first thing I want to do is just review like sort of the most specific situation that results from this like the initial open guard situation, which is somebody being beside you here and you having this sort of situation going. And what almost everybody, when they're learning this stuff, does is put this foot down all the time. Again, I don't want to say never, but the only time you will want to put this foot down is if you need the assistance to move your hips away to high leg. Right? So we call this like a touch hip escape, as opposed to like, and then trying to hip escape. This is just like, I know it's hard to get over this fact, but hip escaping is almost always wrong when you're doing guard rotation. Because it was the standard for so long in so many clubs, and people were just taught like, if someone's here, you hip escape. The problem is you're making the space that your partner needs to occupy when you do it. So we really want to emphasize this wall, and so we call it out because I'm a history nerd. This is your shield, and this is your spear. Would you ever put your spear on the ground in the middle of a battle? It's the best way I can explain it. All right? Just you're not going to do this. Your partner is going to just be beside you, and I just want you to think about it again. We talked about like, I can cover my head, I can be zone defense if she's trying to like move to north-south, and then I'm trying to get this foot onto whatever I can. Near shoulder, far shoulder, anything, whatever I can other than their face. Please don't step on your partner's face. But other than that, everything is fine. Like if I'm very bendy and can just put my foot in here, great. Now we're back in guard. She can't get away from me. I've got some strong hooks. I can reset. I can play guard. So we'll just reiterate that idea that we are not going to put our foot on the ground. But if you do feel like you have to put your foot on the ground, let's say, yeah, like I've been rotated a little bit over here and I can't access the high leg, I'm going to touch the ground momentarily with the ball of my foot, slightly move my hips away, and then high leg wherever I can. Usually the opposite hip in that situation is kind of the best place to go. And then I can slightly push, again, not extending my legs because I'm creating big levers, just a slight push more to get my hips mobile so I can reset my guard. So just those two purposes, not stepping on the ground and not trying to push your partner away that we're trying to avoid. All right, so just go through that.
Using the high leg.
Are you all right? Really? This is how that works. I do. So again, starting here. You need almost like you want it there. Okay. You need a wall. This is your shield. Right. Right. It's the wall. Now, you rotate the high ground. Slightly this way. There you go. That's it. Yes. Good to me. Guys, pause for a second. So one thing, just because some of you are basically, you're starting here, so that's not really what we're working on right now. I want you to start right here. Like somebody's already past your guard. You didn't get, no, sorry, past your guard. They're past your legs. They're beside you, and you didn't get a chance to do any of the other stuff that we talked about and worked on yesterday. So it's really specific to this situation, and I want you to create this movement like that. Very, very commonly what I see with people is they're extending their hands. So let's say Jen's pushing my legs away, and they're like, this guy, no, geez. Can anybody tell me, I mean, this is obviously wrong, but why? That cacophony was all correct. Yes, my spine was twisted. Yes, my alignment was broken. I'm trying to make frames here where they're not effective, right? So I'm basically just giving Jen access to levers. Levers are being controlled. The space is open. Like basically every possible thing from a conceptual perspective is wrong when people do this. But because, remember we kind of talked yesterday about how it's a lot harder to get a feel for what to do with the legs than what it is than what to do with the arms. Because we do so much with our arms, we tend to overdo the arm part. Like we overdo the leg part out here, and then when somebody's over here, we overdo the arm part. And we do everything still wrong with the legs. It's, you know, so I just want to really reinforce that if I keep this, my elbow around the outside of my knee, basically an unbroken wall from my toes through to my fingers. As long as I have this, I'm not really concerned with being passed. Even if Jen starts to push me over, this is still fine. Even though she's got some weight on me, as long as she doesn't separate this and then occupy this space, this is still very recoverable. If you can Granby, you can Granby. Like that's the reason we went over that at the beginning, is no matter how bad things get over here, I can still recover. And you see, as the range extends, as I move myself away, I can go to that biceps frame now. And because the height of my arm is around her hips, I'm not worried about being armbar. If I were to do something silly, you know, like this, yeah, of course, I'm going to be armbar. But as long as I maintain this knee elbow connection, I get pressured into, I get rotated the other way, I can still recover to my Granby. Right? So let's just add that in. I want you to try to do this and get that high leg over. But if you've just been over-rotated, try to stick your hand on your partner's biceps, put the ball of this foot on the ground, stick your butt up in the air, and add the Granby at that point. All right? Let's keep going,
No, it's setting.
Yes, I need to clarify a bit of movement here. So, okay. So the interpretation that I'm seeing from a few people is to start pushing my legs over, is that I should do this. That I definitely shouldn't do that. I'm breaking my knee elbow connection massively when I do that. I'm maintaining my knee elbow connection, and I'm starting to invert as my hand goes to the biceps. You notice there was never a break in my knee elbow connection. I never created a space between my armpit and my hip. Right? And this is, again, it's very, very common for people like, I've got to do something with my hands, and then they put their feet down. It's what we're trying, like if I could hammer this into your heads, don't put your feet down. Right? The only time it's okay is when you quickly need to move your hips. Right? If you spend any amount of time doing this, you're absolutely going to get your guard passed and you're going to get submitted. So it's not just that you're giving up a guard pass, you're giving up a worse guard pass than you would have if you just did nothing. Right? Like if I just did this and Jen started to pass my guard and she got in, I'm like, okay, well, passed my guard, not that big of a deal. I've still got a crack. Like you can see how I've still kept my elbows in. I still have a crack and re-guarding. But if I go like this and put my feet down, now I've got no crack or re-guarding. Like I'm just definitely going to get completely like messed up. So like it's, like I said, it's not just wrong, it's worse than nothing. It's worse than that's how bad it is. It's worse than nothing. All right? So when we're doing this motion, this foot is going to the ground, and as my hip comes up, it goes to the side of my like biceps elbow area. So instead of knee elbow connection, it's like hip elbow connection. And then I can complete my Granby and get back to safety. But I'm never just doing that. All right, let's keep going, guys.
Okay.
There you go, that was good. Wide as you can. Okay, when you come out of the Granby, feels cool. It's not this. Okay, guys, one more thing I just want to progression I want to give Alex first. Okay, this is really important. I know I mentioned yesterday we don't want to Granby and all that kind of stuff, but if we have to Granby, it's really important to understand this sort of, let's say, conceptual mechanism. If Alex is pushing my leg down, and I try to Granby by bringing my leg back against him. So I'm seeing a fair bit of this from some people, like, you know, some kind of whatever's going on here, and they're like, yeah, there we go, and they're pushing their leg back against this. So just, you know, right now Alex's arms are what? Frames or levers? My leg is what? Right. Is a lever ever going to beat a frame by virtue of my immensely powerful adductors and abdomen? Obviously not, right? The mechanism of the Granby is not this lateral movement. It's not like a barrel roll. The mechanism of the Granby is replacing my butt with where my knee was. So I'm not trying to go to the side. There's force coming down here. I'm trying to make my butt go through this space where there's no force being applied. If I keep trying to do this, it's not going to work. But as I drive my butt through the space and then keep my legs nice and wide, that's what I'm going for. So without Alex there, coming up a little bit, and then I'm using the ball of my foot that's on the ground to push my butt through the space, but I keep my shoulder where it is. And then I swing my legs out. Right? It's very important that that's what we're doing when we Granby. If we're just trying to move back against our partner, I mean, again, it'll work if they're not really resisting us, if they don't have a proper frame. But the purpose of a Granby is almost always, I can't go back this way. So I swing my hips out. Right? So for those of you that are having a little bit of trouble with that, just focus on that for a few minutes. Right? So if your legs are being pushed, let's say, this way, all of your foot on the ground, stick your butt under the arrow, and now swing your legs wide to make sure you capture it. And Kerry, you want to just keep the pressure, right? So like, if I'm here, maintain because if I'm way back here, he doesn't need to do anything. He can just kind of reset his guard. So we're here, and now this leg swings. Yeah, you got it. Yes, pause for a second. I just want to add a little bit of detail here. This might get a little physicsy. I apologize. Just lost my train of thought. Everybody here knows what inertia is?
Inertia is a mass times a velocity.
Yeah. So it's basically, when something's in motion, it tends to stay in motion. When something's at rest, it tends to stay at rest. That's kind of the Newtonian explanation for it. So what's happening here is the way that some of you are applying this, and it's the learning process, so I get the need to slow it down and isolate it, but we're fighting inertia, a lot of us, when we do this. So Jen, start to push my leg down. So I'm like, okay, there we go. And now you notice how Jen's settled in? And now I've got to create movement, so I have to overcome the inertia of our bodies have stopped moving. So I'm like, I'm demanding an awful lot of my bottom leg in this case. How this is supposed to work is, oh, there we go. She started to push my leg, so I used the inertia of her pushing my leg to push me into the Granby. I'm not waiting till I'm squished and then trying to pop back up. Right? So, especially if you're smaller. You know, there's some size mismatches in here today, and if you're trying to Granby after somebody pushes your leg down and everybody, both participants stop moving, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult, right? So, inertia, momentum, whatever helps you. If there's a certain amount of momentum being generated, I've got to take that momentum and use it, right? It's the sort of lame explanation of judo or jiu-jitsu from 50 years ago, using your partner's force against them. it's kind of a silly way of explaining it, but that's basically what we're doing here is we're using the momentum of this being pushed over to get us into our Granby. It's not that you can't Granby without using inertia or momentum. It's just it's much more difficult if you're fighting against it. So try to, I guess, as soon as you feel comfortable with the movement, try to do the movement with the aid of your partner pushing your leg and timing it that way. There's a whole thing about timing, like, especially if you haven't done this stuff too long. Like in jiu-jitsu, we're very obsessive about like being technically correct. You can have a really technically correct and precise movement, but if it's done at the wrong time, that precision is wasted. It's irrelevant. You can have an okay movement, but if the timing is really, really good, it's going to work. So like, not that I want to take away the importance of being technical and being precise and all that kind of stuff, but if you just develop good timing, your overall technique can actually be, let's just say, a little bit worse than we might even realize. I've seen some people with like pretty shoddy technique, but they're great athletes and they've got really good timing and they move at the right time and they get away with stuff that really, I don't want to say shouldn't work because obviously it did, but like just keep that in mind. We're not just trying to develop, oh, it's my leg goes here, my foot goes here, and my elbow goes here. We're trying to develop the, this is when I do this. And if you can do it at that point, everything just gets much easier. All right, so just keep going. You don't want to still put that foot on the ground, right? Like if we're curled up here, right? This helps spring you into the movement. So this helps you initiate the movement. This helps, so hang on. This needs to be closer to your shoulder if you can get it there. Now pop your butt up in there. Yeah. So this starts you moving, and then that springs you into the, yes, beautifully done, yeah. Yeah, you got it. So now it's timing and rhythm in all combat sports, right? Like people recognize it more in striking. There's a term called broken rhythm that you're trying to incorporate when you're striking. You want to incorporate it into jiu-jitsu too. This is a little harder because we're going to the passive rhythm. So we can't set and then break the rhythm. But you know, if I was teaching the flip side of this, as a passer, what do? I want to set a rhythm so that you, as the person doing the guard retention, is used to that rhythm, and then I break that rhythm. And then all of a sudden you move at the wrong time. So I can screw up your time. For him to onboard me, his hips have to get to flow open. Just keep this and walk into our arm. See, it's difficult to stop me from getting here before that happens because my elbow's so low. As you're extending your arm out rather than keeping it. I'm not sure if I take Yeah, you can totally do that. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we do this. It sets up breathing triangle. Yeah. Just working it out. Guys, how's everybody feeling with this movement? Is this getting a little bit more intuitive? Okay. Now we can move on to, like, we'll go over one situation here and how we can apply this this bicep first. So how many people have been knee cut before, right? Like somebody gets through here, you're like, ah man, what do I do to defend this, right? If we start with more of this idea of bicep frames or elbow frames, if we rewind for a second, let's say Jen is controlling my legs here, and she starts to move into a knee cut. Keep going. Right? And now I can do that high leg. So we're just going to put this into a very we're going for like really general open guard retention. Now we're going to focus in on a really specific guard retention scenario, which is somebody controlling your ankles or your knees, like it can be pant grips. It really doesn't matter what version of this you're utilizing. We're just doing this, and we're making sure that you can see the difference here. Now I don't have a good biceps frame. Now she can come into her knee cut because all that she needs to succeed with the knee cut is her forearm or her shoulder has to get in front of my thigh. If I can't get this leg in the way, knee cut's happening. I might have an answer for it afterwards, but it's at the very least happening. Whereas if I have this frame here and this frame here, even if she goes all the way into the knee cut and like puts her knee down on the ground and goes past my guard, so windshield wiper your leg over, I can still do kind of that same thing that we were doing yesterday, which is just the hands and not actually using my legs to defend. Right? So we'll start here, hands on biceps, your partner moves into a knee cut, keep this framed out. If you can't get to the biceps, like sometimes it's rewind for a second, get the sun, I don't know, all right? Here we go. If for whatever reason I miss the opportunity at the biceps, I'm just going to post on the shoulder, because the reason this is great is because it's a lever to the shoulder. It allows me to control this corner. It's not the biceps like by itself for no reason that we're targeting. We're targeting it so that it can access the shoulder. So if I miss this opportunity, I'm just going to post on the shoulder. And now I should just be able to high leg and reset my guard. So biceps is good, shoulder is also good. If for whatever reason your arm is a little bit bent here, you let them get too close, get that shoulder, push it away. All right? And if your partner's bigger than you and you can't push them away, you push yourself away. So let's say Jen just became She-Hulk and I can't move her, I move myself away. And then I high leg. All right, so play with that a little bit, guys. You started hip escaping instead of high legging.
Okay, so we should.
No, you can. Yeah, because you're just gonna high leg now. Yeah, there you go. That's it, yeah. Because remember, in this case, the knee-elbow connection was already interrupted by the knee. Right, so okay, knees relaxed. So I got to here, like, hands on my biceps. Yeah. And then I got to here.
Right.
So the knee-elbow connection's already gone.
It's gone.
Right? For the purposes of this exercise, we're now recovering for this. You wouldn't want to let me do this necessarily if we were rolling, but if I got here and you just kept this, and now push your chest away from me a little bit. No, not those are your hips. Your chest is this, your hips. There you go. Yeah. So push yourself. Don't throw yourself flat on the like, stay there, and now just push your chest away a little bit, and now throw your leg over. There you go. That's it. Okay. Just bend your knee. Bend your knee.
Not that flexible. So
That's okay. Just right there is good.
Okay.
Yeah, and now feel a little bit of push.
I can reach it myself.
So keep in mind that everything we're doing here has an optimal range where it's going to be easy for me and difficult for him, and the same thing is true vice versa. There's an optimal range where things are going to start to get easy for him and very difficult for me. So if he comes in and he makes these grips and he's starting to pass, and I'm here, things are going to be very easy for me. I stopped this before he got his knee all the way to the ground. I stopped this before he got his chest. Like, if I do this now, I mean, really it's too late. If his elbow's on the ground, it's no longer a lever, right? It's once his elbow's underneath his shoulder, this is now a weight-bearing frame. I'm not going to move it. In fact, this is an example of me holding on way too long because I got tunnel vision on all I got. Rob said bicep frames are great. Till the wheels fall off, I'm going to make it. That's not how you want to do it, right? So at this range here, he's a little bit closer, and you can see like I can't quite get this foot to go. So I'm not going to be trying to high leg anymore. But what I'm doing is I'm preventing him from bringing his shoulder over this space, right? And I'll just swing my leg, and I'll use that sit-up style of guard retention that we kind of played with a little bit with the hand. So I want you guys to try that now, like long range version. As soon as he comes in, like, oh no, you stay right there. And I high leg before he gets anything going. And then closer range version, he's starting to get here. I'm like, oh crap, pendulum, stiff arm, sit up, and reset your guard to seated position. All right, so try that. Closer. And you can rotate around the axis of his elbow.
Oh, so you don't have to be on the elbow.
No, you can move around. Basically, try and keep your left arm blocked out the whole time until your weight is down. There you go. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so let me explain this a little bit for the gym person. Okay. Again, we're going to get a little physicsy. Axis of rotation. So when I'm trying to get up, in the later stage version, sorry. So we're down here like this. Yeah, her knee is kind of forward, her shoulder's forward. I can't really make the high leg work. If I use this leg as a pendulum and I go like this, and I go to get straight up against her, it's unlikely to work. And there's a pretty significant size disparity here. So if it was ever going to work, I should have been able to make it work there. What I'm looking to do is rotate my body. So there's going to be an axis of rotation relative to her shin, and there's going to be an axis of rotation relative to her upper arm and her shoulder. So I'm going to be doing this. I'm trying to circle my body outside of the, again, physics, force vector, right? So Jen is generating force basically off of her base leg at an angle, you know, sort of 45 degrees towards me. If I try to overcome that here, I can't do it because I don't have a post behind me, right? Like the post and force vector concept states that if I don't have a matching angle to my post, I can't really oppose the force vector. So because I don't have a post behind me at this corner that I can use to generate force, I can't really do anything in this direction. So I've got to move myself like this around her. So when I pendulum my leg, I'm using it, if you watch my shoulder as I go, I'm not going up and forward. There's too much force in the way. I'm going around. You can see there, like, she adjusted. That's actually, we were talking about like skillful response. Jen adjusted her base to face me because if she had stayed where she was, that's what would have happened, right? And that's how quick the conversation, let's call it, is going to happen as you go up against better and better. I was just having a talk there about how, like, a lot of times we think something works because we're pulling it off on lower level people. As you start to do this stuff against higher level people, right? If you do this against a lower level person, you drag them by you and they face plant, you're like, man, this move is sick. I'm just going to use this all the time. I'm going to let people get really deep on a knee cut, and then I'm going to do this, and then like, oh. And so, like, just keep in mind, it's a great movement, but the conversation at a higher level is going to happen very quickly. It's going to be yeah, no, yeah, no. Yeah, not a great conversation, I know, but like that's the speed at which it's going to occur. So don't count on this to like change a lot. It should just be the difference between it working or not working against somebody who's actually got their body positioning down. And as soon as you start to change that axis of rotation, they're going to go to match you. And that brings us back to timing, which is if I do this at the right time, it'll work great. If I'm like really obvious, like 1, 2, and I go to do this, she will switch her base, she'll turn, she'll do something like, and it won't work anymore. So it's a sweet movement if I do it kind of like, oh, damn, there we go. And the second she got into the range, I go. All right? So play with it a little bit more. You shouldn't be struggling to drive up. You should be using this leg as a pendulum to rotate yourself around the axis of their shin, their elbow, and using your butt as the point of rotation, like your right hip. Okay? Let's keep going, guys. Yeah, it's minor. It's like, you know, it's not a foot. It's like a couple of inches between when I do my high leg and when do I go. And that just gets, the increments get smaller and smaller with better and better. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Nice.
Almost gives you a choice whether you want to do the high leg or not.
Right here, that's like super Want me to get that one in? Or both ways?
Yep.
That way?
Okay, guys, let's take a breather. So this is that's the material we're going to add today. If we had more time, we would do more, but I have a boat to catch. So yeah, next time that won't be the case. I'll come in on Friday and we'll have more time. One of the things that's going to be really tricky for you to get is with this movement, almost everybody bends their elbow as they're coming up at first. And if that happens, we went from a frame to a lever against us. And it's a more powerful lever because this, like our forearm, will push our elbow back, which will pin our shoulder back. So it's really important when we're doing this that we're keeping this as locked out as we can and rotating around that axis. That problem is probably not going to get solved today. I just wanted to put it in your head for when you're working on this and you get knocked back and you're like, damn, this doesn't work. It's not my fault. Your fault. It just takes a little bit of time. I always say, like, we have this phrase at my club, like, whenever you don't get something, it's never your fault, it's always my fault. And it just means that, like, I need to explain it again. And as a beginner, you're not supposed to be awesome at this stuff. And beginner doesn't mean beginner to jiu-jitsu. It's like if I'm teaching you a movement, you could be a black belt, and you might be a beginner at that movement, and you're not just going to be great at it right away. So it's always okay to ask questions and blame me. So just keep that in mind. If I'm not here to blame, just
Make sure that right arm is free to post.
yes. Make sure that you're able to post, and make sure that your elbow is locked out, and you should be